things that have allowed me to drive success with teams is I'm a firm believer just because you haven't done the job doesn't mean you can't do the job. From a skill set perspective, for me, it's been three. One, somebody who's curious, who wants to learn, that has that growth mindset. I think that if someone is curious and they can go and figure out how to get things done, like, are they curious to solve the problem? A second thing that pops up a lot is just the enthusiasm. I think people use different words. I will take a positive person who wants to help over a higher IQ negative Nancy. And then three, for me, I find that data-centric people, I don't think most things are that complicated. And I think that there's some aspect that if you use data, it can be a really good focus tool, right? To figure out, how do you do the 80-20? How do you get to what's the minimal amount of effort you can put in to get the maximum amount of output?
So Irina, thank you so much for being here today. We're so excited to have you. To kick things off, could you please share a little bit about your background and what's shaped your journey to leading Hootsuite?
It is great to be here. A little bit of what shaped my background, I think there's I would say three things. One, I came to the US as a refugee from Ukraine, and that materially influenced my life. I talk about how there's two lotteries in life. There's the geography lottery, and then there's the parent lottery. I lost the geography lottery, but won the parent lottery that then took me to the right geography. And, we talk about hard work and ambition and all these things. And if you're just born into the wrong place, it's very difficult to get out. And so I have a lot of appreciation for that. Second, I actually started my career in finance. And so I started in investment banking for Morgan Stanley and then went and did private equity investing for Apollo. And it just gave me this amazing skill set at figuring out 80-20. So how do you distill a lot of information coming at you to figure out what's the 20% that can drive 80% of the value? And just having exposure to all these different business models and how to operate at a fast pace. And then third is I just have this appreciation that no is a suggestion. And part of that is from my background and whatnot, but it's been a really helpful tool in my own career and on the operating side of when I hear no, it doesn't really dishearten me. It doesn't disappoint me. All I think about is, okay, great. You're the wrong person. Let me find somebody else. And so I kind of took all those things and really got excited about when I saw Hootsuite. I joined about 3 years ago. And what they are doing at this intersection of communication and social media, I think is really transformative, especially in the world of Gen Z, especially in the world of AI, that 5 billion people are spending 3.5 hours a day on social. The capabilities around social intelligence have gone so far, and I'm really excited that we get to lead our enterprise customers through that journey to listen to their customers and their employees on social media.
That's such an incredible story. And I mean, there's so much transformation and, future and even what you spoke about. But for those who aren't as familiar with Hootsuite, I mean, it's such an iconic brand in the social media space. It's been evolving a lot. You have incredible customers like IKEA, U-Haul, Adobe. And so for those that aren't quite as close to it, could you give us a quick snapshot about what Hootsuite's focused on today and some of the things you help customers with?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of three main examples. One, we talked about a little bit about intelligence, but every CMO and CEO right now is trying to figure out what are people saying about their brand. And what is the sentiment versus their competitors versus others in the space. And so we have the ability on a pretty specific and very targeted level to be able to give our CMOs and CEOs the insight into how their brand is getting perceived in the market, what their share of voice is, how they measure up, what the sentiment is. The second most important is around the social intelligence. And it is, we talk about being culturally relevant in order to build relationships with our customers. And one of the ways to be culturally relevant is to listen to the conversation and participate in it. And so we work a lot with a lot of big brands to basically highlight how do you get involved in the various conversations, whether it's about your brand or whether it has nothing to do with your brand. And then the third piece is Gen Z is really involved on social, and they are having most of their conversations in your comments. And so we help customers basically have 24/7 comment interaction. We call it social care, so that if they're asking to purchase a hotel room, a plane ticket, which they do in the comments, or they're just saying, hey, I'm happy here, or I'm unhappy here, we know that there's a really high correlation with customer repurchase and satisfaction is if there's an answer to those comments within minutes. And so how do you have an always on AI bot that's representing your brand and really either proactively grabbing something before it's a problem or proactively building a relationship? And then lastly, in the HR space, we see this a ton, is your employees are on social. And so how do we build employee advocacy? Your employees are your strongest brand advocates. People don't want to buy from a brand. They want to buy from people they know. And, we have an insurance company that you've all heard of, and they, across 19,000 agents, leverage their own employees as brand advocates to drive business. We have that with, we have another company that's a pharma company that leverages almost 100,000. We have hospital systems that leveraging thousands of their nurses to talk about the things of why they love the hospital system they work at, why they're happy about what's happening. And we see that employee advocacy be one of the best brand enablers, and employee engagement as a fun side fact.
With your permission, I would like to take a step back to your introduction. And as a CEO, it seems like you attribute most of it, basically your success and what you learned to, again, the fact that you're an immigrant, and the fact that you were investment banker, for example, totally different skill set. When you look at talent as a CEO, probably you came 3 years ago, you hired some people since then. What are the most important things? And even more specifically, how do you look at it in the lens of basically skills? How much of the weight do you give to actual experience versus just kind of raw skills or even raw circumstances, like the fact that you're an immigrant, to your ability to be successful?
I love that question because it doesn't presume that having the experience is what gets you the job, but it actually is a skills-based question. And I really relate to that. I think one of the fundamental things that have allowed me to drive success with teams is I'm a firm believer just because you haven't done the job doesn't mean you can't do the job. And so from a skill set perspective, for me, it's been three. One, somebody who's curious, who wants to learn, that has that growth mindset. I think that if someone is curious and they can go and figure out how to get things done, are they curious to solve the problem? A second thing that pops up a lot is just the enthusiasm. I think people use different words, but I will take a positive person who wants to help over a higher IQ negative Nancy, because that negative Nancy just dilutes the entire culture, takes down the whole team, versus a positive person. They might not have the answer, but they'll create an environment to help other people find the answer. And so that I really appreciate that. And then three, for me, I find that data-centric people work really well with my brain. I don't think most things are that complicated. And I think that, and again, I believe in art and science. I don't think data can get you the entire way. But I do think that there's some aspect that if you use data, it can be a really good focus tool, right? To figure out, how do you do the 80-20? How do you get to what's the minimal amount of effort you can put in to get the maximum amount of output? And so I have promoted lots of executives. I've given people C-suite roles that have never had the job before. And honestly, it doesn't bother me. And I've had board members and investors be like, how could you give this person this opportunity? And there's two things that happen. They'll either rise to the challenge and they'll figure it out, or they won't. But the risk I'm taking on them, I view that as a much lesser risk than hiring somebody from the outside where I don't know who their culture is. I don't know what their values are. I'm getting sold to. Versus here, I've been able to test their personality, their skill sets, how they show up. And I think I've had a pretty good hit rate internally. Yes, of course, here and there it doesn't work, but the majority has worked versus on the outside, my hit rate is not so good.
And does it work also when it's not the same role? Like when it's something completely off, like you take someone from finance, you're putting them in marketing, and they're giving us something completely different?
I just don't think anything is that completely different. I come from a perspective, unless, again, there's skilled roles where you have to operate on somebody. There's like regulatory roles where you need that. For the majority of operating roles, like most people who are really good executives on the operating side, they're problem solvers. They're able to have low ego, work with teams. They're able to find and build good teams. And so I'll give you my latest example. I just moved my chief people officer to be my chief customer officer. And you look at that, and from the outside, you think that's a little strange. But then when you dig into what makes a good chief people officer, they are building an internal customer experience, right? They're doing a lot of operations of making sure the employee is engaged, the internal customer is engaged. They're doing all the activities they need to. They have their own funnel math. They're constantly interacting with hiring and understanding what that looks like. And so it's very similar skill sets. On the customer side, they're just called different things. And so, yes, there's a learning curve, but if a person wants to and raises their hand and they have that underlying skill set, I will bet on that 9 out of 10 times.
I love it. It's funny. I just had this conversation with my co-founder. And yeah, what is the weight of, let's say, yours are curiosity, positivity, and being data driven, right? These are your 3. But yeah, what's the weight and what the importance of the actual background, assuming it's not something compliance was, like you mentioned. And it's very refreshing. And I wonder, as an organization, so you basically have unlimited options for people. It's not like you grow up in sales, you are going up to the sales funnel until you're a CRO, but you can do basically whatever you want. So first, how common is it? Like how many people, if like high level, right? Like you're a data person, out of Hootsuite, like how many people actually didn't start in the role that they're like the HR to customer example? And number 2, how do you encourage that and basically let people imagine and build like the internal process to actually train them and funnel them towards the right opportunity?
I think it's a really hard thing to build culturally because I get to take that risk as a CEO. And a lot of people are thinking, is this a risk I want to go take? And so I have learned with anything with culture that actions speak a lot louder than words. And so when people see me making decisions in a certain way, they are probably more open to considering that in their own world. I don't know if that happens every time, but they'll definitely think twice about it. I think within my own career, where I've had executives not work, when you look on paper, they've been the strongest executives, right? Their resume, you would look at it and you're like, you're hiring IBM. You're not making a mistake here, right? And then you get in, and so much of what makes their resume so strong is the things that make it not what works for me, right? They're not curious. They come with a playbook. This is how it's done. They name their former company 10 times in one sentence, and you're just sitting there like, okay, great. I might not be a special snowflake, but I don't want to fit into the box that you have either. And so I just think this growth mindset is really unique. And in a world of AI, it's going to be the only thing that differentiates you. And so it's hard for me to put a percentage on it, but I will tell you within my own hiring practice, so like the C-suites, the ELTs that I've built, I would probably say more than 50% didn't have either, it didn't have that specific job title. Those that were never C-suite before, I would almost say 80%. So, but I'm okay taking that risk because to me, it's a very calculated risk, right? Back to my data background. I already have a lot of the inputs that I need. And we see it on the customer side too, right? Like when you think about, in bringing it back to, I spent a lot of time with CMOs and CEOs, and this goes back to, again, betting on your own people. Like when you're running a marketing campaign, you're taking a really big risk if it's going to resonate from a creative perspective, from an ROI perspective, versus when you're taking kind of a risk on your own people, you know that the math shows that employees have a much higher conversion rate, that employee advocacy has much better ROI. And so it's wild to me that we spend so much time working with our customers and prospects, convincing them to do employee advocacy, but they're ready to do campaigns, right? When the math kind of supports one is a much more de-risked opportunity.
Irina, I mean, I think that that's such a great way of kind of thinking about it. And so much of what you talk about, and for those who don't follow Irina on LinkedIn, you really kind of like live and breathe this, how you show up, how you communicate authentically, how you raise the brand. And you talked about how there's, so many different benefits for companies, whether it be being involved in that social commentary, attracting employees. Just wondering if you could share a little bit about kind of your journey into getting more front facing for Hootsuite on LinkedIn and what kind of helped you kind of guide that process.
Yeah, I think it's a little scary. Again, I mentioned like I'm Eastern European, going on social media is just not like a very natural cultural thing. Like you're kind of raised to like whisper at home and not talk about, don't spread your business on the street kind of thing. And I think what did it for me is just looking at the math of the benefit our customers were getting on being on social. And so I leaned in, and I did it in kind of many ways of how people do it wrong in the beginning. So when I first started on LinkedIn, I would post about our products. I would constantly be asking, right? Click on this, see this new thing we're doing. And the analogy that I give now as going through my own journey is imagine you went to a dinner party and I came up to you, Laura, and I was like, let me tell you about the wonderful things I'm doing. Let me tell you about this product. And it's all about me. At some point, you just slowly back away from me and try to get as much distance as humanly possible. But yet that is how we all emerge into social media. Let me tell you about all these awards. Let me tell you about all these things. And that's not really, as consumers of knowledge and entertainment, that's not what we want to follow. And so within a few months, and by the way, the market is very corrective. And so you very quickly see these things don't get engagement. These things do get engagement. And so you get a lot of really fast feedback. And for me, and also I learned the things I like and don't like. And so I very rarely would do on my social any brand promotions or anything where I'm asking. The studies and the research that Hootsuite have found that basically you need to give 9 times before asking for once. And so we very much follow that formula. And because from a brand perspective, Hootsuite has this amazing brand around social media management, but we bought this enterprise level social listening platform. And so I've been leaning into the listening. I've been leaning into the social intelligence, hearing what do my customers want to hear from me? What's trending? What's the sentiment? And so much of my content has been coming from that data and that intelligence I've been hearing, right? And the things that have resonated for me is around leadership, giving examples of how my CMOs and my customers have been leveraging tools to be more productive. And then the third thing that really resonates is kind of behind the scenes, whether I'm going to a conference or a dinner, something that people aren't normally a part of or included, and kind of giving my version of behind the scenes, not a get ready with me. And that it seems to work, but there's so much learning that happens along the way and finessing. And I think the biggest unlock for me has been video. While I don't speak with an accent, writing still a second language for me. And so writing things out, I would constantly be correcting and iterating. And it was long and it was not the best use of my time, versus now I'm in an Uber or I'm somewhere, I just pick up my phone, I record it, and then we go. And it's really just given me such efficiency.
Oh, that's amazing. So, well, I mean, you're so fortunate where you have this data and these insights, and a lot of other people do too. And then it sounds like you're also doing a little bit of testing and learning and iterating along the way. You're kind of making me think about the saying of be the most interested person in the room instead of the most interesting. So getting people to talk more about themselves and share that, and really being able to add value. I saw that you were recently at an event with a bunch of CMOs, and this must have been a bombshell that you dropped, because a lot of people commented on your posts that you were talking about how you can't move at the speed of the market if you're not listening to it. And so we have a lot of HR leaders that listen to this podcast. I'm curious, what's your version of that for HR leaders? Like, how should they be thinking about social and listening and really the value they can create?
I honestly think it's so similar to the CMO function. It's just your buyers are internal. And I can guarantee you that if not 99, then 98% of your employee base is on social in some way. And so how you show up on social drives engagement. We know that there's data on it. It drives people, referring people to come work for you. So your candidate acquisition costs go down. So understanding how your brand is perceived, what the sentiment of it, what are your employees saying about you? And, for some of our companies, we have the connection for everybody, but HR uses this a lot. We connect into Glassdoor, we connect into LinkedIn, we connect into kind of the social platforms that are really relevant from an employee perspective to understand where's your brand resonating, where's their engagement, where's their not. CMOs take that and do revenue with it. CHROs take that and drive engagement and lower cost to attract. But one of our largest financial services customers needed to hire 8,000 private wealth managers over the course of a few years. And so they actually went to employee advocacy to do it with us, because the best way to bring on talent is not for the brand to talk about how great it is to work at so-and-so company. It is about getting the employees to post why they like it, why they keep showing up, why they're excited. And they got over 50% of their new recruits using employee advocacy tools. Yeah, and it's wild. And I'm not even talking about the cost savings of that, right? But it's also employees, candidates that come that have a social network, we know stay so much longer, are more plugged into the community. And so it's just a really amazing marketplace and community to listen into and join. And one of the things I love is when I hear CEOs or leaders say, okay, but it's not relevant for me. They don't buy on social or whatever it is. And I love that, because right now, so far, we're all still human. And every single human is on social. Think about your day-to-day. I will go back to that. See, I'm like, how much time, if you were honest and you opened up your screen time on your phone, how much time are you spending on social? How much of what you're seeing is resonating in your brain? And the analogy I use is, on average, people are 5 to 7% likely to click on an ad and actually follow through. Versus when you get a reference from a friend, you're 70% likely to go do that reference. Yet our budgets are mostly on ads and very little on organic and earned. And so it's the same thing. Like, you are more impressionable from your community. And so if you are as a human, chances are the other humans that work with you are doing the same as well.
Irina, I would like, with your permission, to do a small masterclass live. Like, just the average person, who just listens to this episode, going on LinkedIn tomorrow. Let's say we understand the why should you do that, because it will increase your presence, maybe the odds of finding another role, like other people interacting with you and so on and so forth. But kind of like how?
Number one is start following people that you're interested in. So that's an easy one. It requires very little of you to put yourself out there. And the reason that that's important is because number two is just start by commenting. And by the way, this is the same advice I give CEOs, because I spend a lot of time with CMOs that are trying to get their CEOs engaged. And so the second thing is literally just comment. And the algorithms really disproportionately like commenters, even more so than just straight posting. And so just by, and it's not a thumbs up, that doesn't count as a comment. If that can be your gateway drug, that's fine. But it's actually something that resonated with you, adding your perspective. And I almost can guarantee you that if you do 5 or so of those comments, you'll get inspired to do a post on something. And so the commenting is such a great gateway into getting involved more. But even if you never do a post, you can stay in the commenting section of the world and move around. And it actually, from an algorithm perspective, drives a lot of exposure.
And then let's say, okay, I commented, let's say understand, I follow interesting people, I comment and add my perspective. Then I want to post. And then it's like, I don't feel good about opening my camera.
Yeah, like, how do I do this? And by the way, this is a problem that we see with every single one of our customers. And it's also one of the ways, like, we just started working with this hospital that merged, and they got almost 100,000 of their employees on social. And they were scared to do that. There's compliance reasons, like we work with a lot of financial services, and employees are scared they're going to get fired if they post the wrong thing, even on their own personal accounts. And so by going through Hootsuite, this is all compliance regulated. So we actually have tools that tell you, Omar, you can't post that. It's out of compliance. And so even if you wanted to hit post, you wouldn't be able to, and it'll flag the words that are inappropriate. But then also when it's centralized in this way, you actually get content. So there's content that's produced, whether it's in the company or your CEO's posting, and it gets dropped into the central repository at Hootsuite. Then an employee doesn't have to think about what is it that they want to post. They can just take this and reshare, add their own thoughts. And then from an AI perspective, there's some really cool stuff, because the biggest part that people really suffer with is this blank page. What do I post about? How do I start? And so now with our AI tools, you literally take an article you like, a post that you like, anything that inspires you, you copy it, you drop it into the AI tool, and you say, can you give me 5 variations of this, but do it in this tone or do it with this voice, like however you normally would prompt, or like, I really want to pull out this feature because I love traveling, or this nuance because it really resonates with me, and it'll customize the post for you. And so it prevents the compliance and the security aspect, gives you some safety. It takes away the starting with a blank page and gives you some ideas to go with. And you can just do it from a listening. If you have listening tools that are married to the AI, you can say, here's some of the sentiment, or here's what's trending. Give me some examples on what is culturally relevant to talk about right now, and it'll give you some of that. And so we see within a company, when they're using tools like this, that posting grows by 20, 30%, engagement increases, because also people are excited. And it doesn't have to be posting around your products and services. Like some of our best internal, like we obviously drink our own champagne, but some of our most highest engagement posts are when we're posting about our annual giving day, or when we have our annual volunteer stuff. Like, people want to share what they're doing. And it also drives a lot of candidate traffic for us as well.
Oh, that's incredible. I love the idea of being able to give people simple tools to get started and some guidelines of, maybe don't post that you're having a nap under your desk, but let's lean into some of the company behaviors that we want to reinforce on social. When you look at some of the listening tools and whatnot that you have, you gave such a cool example about anthropology and listening from a customer perspective. How can HR leaders use some of that social listening to look for, opportunities or things around their culture or engagement or employee trends?
I think listening is just, if you were to ask me if there's one tool that, whether you're a CMO, CRO, CHRO, CEO, you pick whatever C-suite you want. In a world that we operate today, without having access and visibility to social listening, it's like basically operating without a phone to your business. Your doors are slammed shut and your windows are colored black. I don't know how, as a business, you can operate without having the perspective of what your customers, employees, the market, the industry are saying about you around your product launches, your services launches. That sentiment, I think, is so critical. And so having access to that social intelligence, whether it's impacting your product roadmap, whether it's impacting your marketing campaigns, whether it's impacting your candidate acquisition, I think it's critical. It's no longer social media, it's just media.
I think that makes so much sense, because at the end of the day, a company really only has one brand, right? And there's many different elements of it that will come to life, whether you're focused on customer or product or employees. I know Hootsuite has the how to soar behaviors, and that might be some of what is kind of the underpinning for some of your social strategy. How can HR leaders kind of think about, their cultural their culture and their values, and help guide employees to kind of bring to life social media and advocacy that aligns with it?
And I think the cultural element is really important, because one of the things that both binds customers and employees is brands being culturally relevant, right? Employees get excited about their brand when they're being relevant in cultural zeitgeist, right? And I was at this conference with the CMO of Delta the other day, and one of the things that she mentioned is that them being culturally relevant is actually one of the things that drives the most brand loyalty. And you would think you're an airline. Who cares about an airline being culturally relevant? And the example she gave is that their flight attendants write thank you notes many times to different passengers. And the number one thing that gets pictured and put on social are these notes. And then they end up being exchanged, liked, and commented. And the feeling, like I see you smiling, the feeling you have when you read a note like that from Delta is warmth, right? It's trust. And so without them going and building a whole campaign of you can trust us, we are warm, you just engage thousands of people that are traveling all over. And by the way, because it's a very authentic moment, it's not the brand saying, write these notes. It's something that's authentic that it really drives more of that relationship building. And we see that even more so from a Gen Z perspective of how much they value authenticity. And they want, one of the stats that we saw in our surveys is they won't buy from a brand whose CEO isn't on social. They want to know what you stand for. And so you could be a trucking company that is really leaning into the things that are relevant, and you're getting eyeballs, you're getting attention, and it has nothing to do with virality. It is just showcasing the values and the authenticity of what you want to stand for. Versus I feel like a lot of people take the approach of, I'm scared of social, so I'm just not going to engage. But it's literally like turning off your phones and your emails and your door and saying, sorry, we don't do business. Because by not engaging, you're not protecting your brand. You're just making your brand irrelevant.
I think there is a question, and Seth Godin talks a lot about it. Like, kind of like marketing is not just the marketing function. It's basically everything. It's how your people treat people. Marketing is in support, is in your employees. It's basically everywhere. You're a company that sells to marketing. So what's your take on that in terms of like how to extend marketing and brand and our values that we want basically to in front of our customers to everyone? So they write notes. So maybe writing notes was prescriptive from the CMO, for example, but it's like there is something behind it that I feel that's real for Delta. Let's take them, for example. So how do you do it for an organization, like kind of like connect marketing to everything?
I think one is building a good culture. I think if you have a tough culture, you're not going to be able to authentically display it. And so when I hear executives saying, oh my God, I wouldn't want my employees to post some of this stuff, I think you have a problem you have to fix. That is a step zero problem before you get there. And that doesn't mean that every single employee is going to post something you love. I think that's okay. That's part of the authenticity journey, right? And so from a culture magnifying perspective, I think what social media does is in many ways put a mirror up to you. And so I think step one is making sure you're proud of the culture that you have. And then step two, I think it goes back to action instead of words. And so, I gave this example, but Visa is a customer of ours, and I love Frank Cooper. He's the CMO of Visa. He's out there. He's authentic. And I built this relationship on social, and I ran into him a few weeks ago, and I asked him how he got started. And he said when he got started about a year and a half ago on social, none of the executives at Visa were posting. He's like, now about 70% are. And it wasn't a mandate. It's just they saw he was having fun. They saw he was getting engagement. They kind of started with comments. They got out there. And then this magical thing happened. He goes, my employees see us and they're engaging more. They're sending us notes. Our customers are excited to talk to us. They're building a rapport and a relationship with us. And so I think it's one of those things where you just start talking about the things that are important to you, and it leads from the front. So if nobody on your C-suite is doing it, the chances are that it's a bottom-up movement is probably going to be tough. The customers that we see have the most success with it is the CEO starts. And it might be awkward at first, it might be weird, but they just start getting into it, right? Mutual of America, I think, does this great job where they lean in and their executives are posting and they're trying new things. And it doesn't matter what it is you're talking about. I just met with the San Jose State University dean and president, and she basically changed their entire enrollment process. They were 10% under budget, under target, and now they're 11% over enrolled. And it's because she leaned in and started posting, and the students got engaged. And by the way, Gen Z makes all their decisions on social. And so I think it starts with executives leaning in, enabling employees, whether it's through employee advocacy tools, but also creating the content that they can repurpose. But it has to come from an authentic place. I think if it starts with you have to post and here's what you need to post, it's just not going to resonate the same way.
I love those tips, and keeping it to the C-suite level. How much of this is actually you doing your posts or other CEOs and CMOs doing their posts, and how much help do you get? Like, what would be the recommendation for people that are looking to start?
Yeah, and I think it depends on your leader. I think if you want to get your leader going and they don't want to do it themselves, then I would just write a few posts for them. And what would happen is when you give them 2 or 3 suggestions, inherently the leader is going to pick something that resonates the most. They'll tweak it to make their own voice. They'll start editing it. And after 2 or 3 of working through it themselves, I guarantee you it might take more than 2 or 3, but there's some volume that they're going to start saying, oh, I have this idea, and they'll take a first stab at it. And so I view it as training reels a little bit, where how do you help get them started? Because the hardest part is getting involved. I think for me, and we talked about this, that, no one's doing my videos for me, obviously. But sometimes you just run out of ideas. And so I'll be like, hey, here's some topics I have. Do you have any ideas? And I have people on my team that are like, oh, well, this would be interesting, or this resonated. What about this? And so it's not a one-woman show. I have people who help me write it. So I have people who help me get ideas. I am not editing my own videos. And so when you see an owl on it, that is not a me doing things. Somebody is helping me with that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think the part that is wrong is if it's 100% outsourced, because it's not going to get traction. It's not going to be authentic, and people will see through it. But I also don't think people expect executives to do everything 100% themselves.
Yeah, and there must be so much benefit to be part of those conversations and part of listening, like not just outsourcing it, but really being able to be in those conversations, hear what people are saying about you, and lean into that a little bit more.
And I learn about also our brand and our own product. And one of the things, and again, because we have this enterprise listening tools, my social and data analytics team sits in every single one of our on-site strategy meetings. They will come in and they will present what our sentiment is, what people think, where are the things that are working, where are not, where are we winning, where are we not, what are the negative things. And so we used to have them come in monthly to the ELT, and they now kind of just share their data, and they do come in sometimes monthly, sometimes quarterly. I mean, there's certain parts when we're releasing something, they're coming in weekly, right? And so that data we leverage a lot for everything. And so for me, what has really been helpful, I'm more plugged into what customers are saying, what's resonating. Ironically, it's actually, so I do this all hands every week. It's 15 minutes instead of kind of a monthly, quarterly thing. It's very TikTok style. And I have pretty good attendance. We usually have 80% people show up, which they're in different time zones. So it's a crazy stat how many people show up, to the point where we now, because only the first 500 get to talk. So I'm like dialing into these calls 2-3 minutes before they even start, just so I can get a spot on the talking sheet. And one of the things that's happened with my LinkedIn is people are more engaging with me on the LinkedIn. Like I'll get Slacks to say, I really resonate with that post, or, it really hit me what you said here, that they might not feel as comfortable engaging on our all hands, but from a social perspective, they see it, they read it, they feel like it's, talking to them. And so there have been so much added benefits, whether it's customer, recognition or employee engagement. And by the way, I hear this from most people that are executives getting involved.
That's incredible. I mean, with visibility and data and these insights, it's something that can really help connect the dots for so many leaders, and also, bring you into people's worlds in a different way than they might not be able to experience you. So it's really interesting to learn about all the different benefits that are kind of tied to this. I think this has been incredibly insightful. Omar, did you have any other questions for Irina today?
No, I like the beginning. I think it's very unique way of basically doing business, and the stat that struck me most was that 50%. Like 50% of the people were not qualified by kind of like their CV doesn't match the role, and your chief people officer becoming your chief customer officer. I think the word is definitely going there. And we hosted a podcast with Karen Kosher, who leads the learning and skilling at Microsoft. And, she talks about how AI basically makes it easier to kind of bridge the gaps of the specific function or role, what the skills are harder, basically to obtain, because you do it throughout your life. And it's more about the skills than the specific assignments, projects, roles that you did. So I think it's fascinating.
right? Like, do you have the ability to lead a team, build a team, inspire a team, execute with a team? I think all of the specificity and the experience of the subject matter expertise, either you can leverage AI from the general perspective, or you can hire more specific AI know-how. But I think the part that AI can't do for you is the leadership part.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Irina. It's so interesting to hear about how leaders can really think differently about these tools and advocacy and really use them as, pieces of their strategy that can make a true impact. And I think everybody should give you a follow on LinkedIn if they're not already, to get a little inspiration that way too. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And it's such an amazing topic to talk about.